Hello and welcome to this InflectraCon 2023 virtual bonus session. InflectraCon will be held from April 19th through the 21st in Washington, D.C. on the campus of Gallaudet University. We are looking forward to 3 days of customer training, partner meetings, industry sessions, networking, and more. Check us out at www.inflectracon.com. This session is led by Sriram Rajakapalan, Enterprise Agile Evangelist at Inflectra. Let's join Sriram now as he starts his session entitled Emerging Trends in Risk-Infused Leadership.
Here is a quick overview of my background. I have my electronics and communication, computer engineering and management background. My terminal degree was on business and management with a doctoral thesis on relationship between emotional intelligence and various leadership styles in IT project management with virtual teams. I have since then done postdoctoral research publications. Some of them include Tones Framework, Parag Framework, and Sleep Framework. I believe in the scholar practitioner model, and I have a number of different certifications behind my credentials as well. I started my career as a software engineer, moved along in the career spectrum, and currently I work as an enterprise agile evangelist. Somewhere along this continuum, I decided that I can also do a lot of training, preparing the next generation in both personal and professional lives. And so I've done a lot of certifications in different places. And I also volunteer, teach, speak, and write in a number of different places, and some of them are listed here. I published my book about 2-3 years back during the pandemic time. It's called Organized Common Sense, primarily focusing on why project management is a life skill. Let's get grounded on what we want to talk today. If you look at what's happening in the world in the last few years, we can see lots of changes in the world, more so than what has happened in several decades. If you summarize them, you can see that technology is accelerating, regulations are catching up, and organizations are always doing this catch-up game. This is between problem solving and decision making, both in the short term as well as in the long term. So if you take this to the next level, we can see that leadership needs to look at both internal and external risks in somewhat unconventional way. Which brings us to what we all normally talk in the offices called policies. And when you take a look at the policy, they appear this way. Policies are generally provided to us, and we start looking at how to implement them within a particular organization, break them into processes, and decompose them into procedures. Ultimately, all of them are based upon certain principles. Let's take, for instance, an IT security policy. When a company wants to implement IT security, they start looking at how to implement them over short term or long term, who needs to adhere to what, and stuff like that. So a traveling salesperson may have to use VPN to connect from different places so that the assets are protected. But at the same time, a developer may need to know how to check out code, check in code, and stuff like that, which is not something that a traveling salesperson may require. So the processes of how the IT security policies are going to be implemented differs based upon certain roles and responsibilities people take on. And when something doesn't go as planned, then we need certain procedures to guide them along. A new person comes in, and that person may not necessarily know how everything is being done. So we need some documented procedures to get that person up to speed. We call them onboarding. Similarly, when the traveling salesperson's laptop gets stolen or misplaced in airport security, we need to find out how to remotely wipe out the data and stuff like that. Now, when you take a look at all these important things that we are talking about, they are all fundamentally based upon the IT security policies, which is confidentiality, integrity, availability, and even non-repudiation. On the management side, we are looking at disaster recovery, business continuity, and data integrity. These are all things that are coming through. So you can look at it from an IT lens, from a management lens, and then start implementing the plan, breaking them into process, procedure, and principle. But when you take a look at this, it appears as though it's like waterfall. And in my humble opinion, waterfall doesn't exist. It only exists in people's mind and not necessarily in practice. And the person who we credit with waterfall framework creation is called Winston Royce. And he did not actually write this way, the requirements analysis, design development, testing, and deployment. He didn't think about it that way at all. In fact, he came and said, there needs to be flow back from every step to the parent step. And this is how he actually articulated that. But practice didn't want to, look at this information, and they rushed and they went with what we now call as waterfall. So waterfall exists only in practice and not in theory. In fact, Winston Royce, who created this model, didn't even stop at the reverse feedback. He went back and said, we need to have double skip level feedback. In other words, if testing failed, don't just immediately go after development, but go after the design. If design is not good, don't go after the analysis, go after the requirements. So, there is a lot more information that was provided as part of what we now call, quote, waterfall, which is not the right way to think about this at all. So when you take a look at the same concepts of how waterfalls are applied into this particular policy, plan, process, procedure, and principle, policy making and administration is bidirectional. It's no longer, waterfall thinking. So it's not just always coming from top down. Instead, it is also not coming from bottom up. In fact, it is coming from all directions. And this is what is one of the important things that we need to keep in mind as we are getting into the next sets of my slides. But where is the world going today? If you look at the world, there are many things that we are currently talking about. Physical and mental health is at the top of everyone's mind. And we are also looking at social inequity. This is more about how we perceive people outside of the workplaces and how we bring those labeling biases and inequities into our personal and professional life. And when we talk about workplace diversity, we mentioned diversity, equity, and inclusivity, but they are all trying to focus on belongingness, how we make sure that we work as a team. And many types of people movement is happening throughout the world. Mass migration of people, asylum seekers, the war that is happening right now, and many other reasons. And similarly, financial and fiscal, related challenges are also coming into play. The trades and tariffs, fiscal challenges relating to currency risks, inflation, demonetization, and many other things are impacting us in a large scale. So the macroeconomic forces are actually bringing its claws down and breathing on the microeconomical elements, right? So these things are all completely connected together, and they are not independently working. They're all working together. So one thing that happens in one particular place, and because of today's world, it's getting impacted in many other places. So the impact is getting felt far away in a different continent or different country. Why? Because this is all enabled by fourth industrial revolution technology. It's already a reality today. Well, I'm sure some of you may have heard about this fourth industrial revolution technology. What exactly is it? Now, when you look at the fourth industrial revolution technology space, these are some of the fundamental things that we all have heard about. Things are supposed to be interoperable. So when you have some data that is input on a mobile app, you are able to see the same information on a website. So things are working together. Virtualization. You don't even know where your emails are located. You don't even know where computing is getting done today with the way things are happening. Decentralization. As much as we say we want everything to be centralized, we are also trying to decentralize so that decision making can be done at the level where decisions are supposed to be. So problems are getting resolved by the teams rather than getting all the way escalated to management for getting things resolved. And we are looking for real-time capability. When people are talking about reports, dashboards, and things like that, we are looking at everything being real-time. Everything being real-time. Service orientation, how our sales is supported by service and how our service is actually being perceived by sales. And this kind of information is happening from a management and business standpoint that actually translates into how technology is perceiving the work and how technology is making things happen. And we are seeing these thought process come into value stream, benefit management, program management, all these areas. And the modularity, trying to make sure that we are repeatedly working on new things and not necessarily working on the mundane tasks, so that we are able to automate some of them, release capacity and things like that. These are all the fourth industrial revolution technology space. Now you need to understand this so that you understand the bigger picture of what else are we generating because of this. And this everybody has heard, like robotic process automation, Internet of Things, simulation activities, cyber security, systems integration, cloud computing, 3D technology, big data, augmented and virtual reality. All these things are pretty much known. None of this is going to be coming across as a shock to you. But if you don't understand some of the principles that actually make these things happen, if you go back to my policy diagram, the principles are getting lost and we're not able to provide as much support to the levels above. And if you recall my discussion there, it's no longer top down or bottom up, it's everywhere. Managing up, managing down, managing sideways, right? So this is also one of the reasons in some talks I have basically said it's not just shift left or shift right, it's also shift up and shift down, right? That's how value flows. Let's take a look at some of the paradigm shift that is creating seismic shifts in the macroeconomic environment. When you look at these major changes that are coming in, technological convergence. As technologies are getting more sophisticated and accelerated, regulations are constantly emerging to ensure that we maximize those things and mitigate the risks as a result of that. So technology is here to stay. Don't get me wrong, technology is here to stay. But as technologies are converging with the fourth industrial revolution space that we were talking about, what are some of the opportunities and what are some of the risks? And we need to be a lot more vocal about this and forthright about this, right? The second thing is going to be people's right. As we allow technology to make decisions for them, are we giving them the right to do what they have to do? Just because technology is available doesn't mean that we can make decisions for somebody else. So I always tell, like, use technology, don't get used to technology, right? How are we doing that? The next one is going to be more about innovation. Innovation is becoming so explosive at this point, and we are looking at both incremental and radical innovation. Many innovations have already happened at this point. Examples are AWS services, Azure services, and stuff like that, that we are seeing, as well as some of the healthcare field, some of the process related fields. So we have seen a lot of different things that we are now almost taking it for granted, right? Now, are they sustainable? Just because we are able to do something does not necessarily mean that we can sustain them in the long term. So how are we able to apply these things within the organizations as well as for the consumers that consume these products? How are we supporting that? So we need to start thinking in terms of how we are doing these things. So if we only focus on one element of this space and not necessarily all the elements of the space, maybe the product that we are going to create will have limited lifespan. And so we need to start thinking these things, and policies as a result are catching up with respect to all these forces that are shaping both the market as well as the industry, right? Now, based upon this, I have come up with my own predictions. I've studied some of these markets and industries, and done a reasonable amount of research for me to come down with these are the emerging top trends. And again, at a disclaimer, as things change, these top trends may shift. Some other trends may replace this, but as it stands right now, this is what my thought process is. Now, attracting and retaining talent. Right? That seems to be one of the biggest thing that we are all talking about. Even today we are discussing quiet quitting and stuff like that. And then we are talking about training for continuous learning. Like, how do you make sure that these people stay? How do you motivate and promote them with adequate amount of training so that they are able to constantly produce things? And automation and quality focus. Yes, we are moving into more of a quality dimension here rather than just testing alone. And we are also looking at how to make sure that we are automating things so that we are releasing our capacity for other things. And the fourth thing is about scaling agile project management. I use the word project management rather than product management, primarily because the project by definition is a temporary endeavor to deliver a unique product, service, or result. So projects are those phoenix birds that come up, deliver that particular product iteration or release and stuff like that. Once that's done, it's reliving itself. So product is long term, project is short term, and they both are required. And you cannot come and say we only need product management or not project management thinking. Now, increased IT expense spend, it is going to constantly keep increasing because a lot of different things that we are talking about are all involving more experimentation, more innovation, and stuff like that. As a result, we will require more and more increased spend. And when you look at these things, when the APIs and interoperability, the modularity and applications talking among themselves, systems integrated and stuff like that, you are looking at API governance. What are some of the important things that these things have to live by, and how secure they are, how sustainable they are, and stuff like that. So those things are all repeatedly emerging. And prescriptive AI and ML analytics. Artificial intelligence and machine learning, it's becoming more prescriptive. As well as the predictive, to be very honest with you, to the next level, evaluating how things will continue to emerge. So those things are also coming up at this particular point. And again, there is a lot of research and a lot of history behind false positive, false negatives, and how we handle these things. There's a lot of information over there. That we are not getting into the details here. But then outcome-based product management, when projects are creating the product, we are focusing on the outcome, because the outputs from the projects are integrated as outcome, and all these outcomes should be integrated into the programs and portfolios, so that the products generate the benefits for the organization, and these benefits translate into value for the customer and the end users. That thought process is emerging, and this is one of the reasons why many people are telling, like, okay, we need to shift our thinking from project thinking to product thinking, primarily because we want to look at the end consumer and how our products solve the need, create the value. And while you are doing these things, we are becoming more environmentally conscious and making sure that we are not polluting the environment. These things are emerging as well. And finally, the metaverse. Yes, we are still in our Earth universe, but there is already bigger concepts of creating our own avatars who will make decisions for us in the absence of us and stuff like that. And there is a bigger metaverse thought process that is emerging, and these things are also coming up, right? So some of my projected timeline, and I want to call this out with a disclaimer again, and this is my projection, and as things change, these projections may accelerate or may decelerate, or something else may completely replace these things as well. In 2023, we are already seeing this great resignation, quiet quitting, and stuff like that. So new emerging talents are coming up. People are not necessarily always satisfied with the challenges that they get, and they are looking elsewhere for the challenges. And we are also creating more and more new breed of graduates and new employees who are looking for bigger challenges. So emerging talents are repeatedly being hungry for work, right? And then when you look at 2024, how do you make sure that they are properly trained? I have had people that will come back and say, yeah, I returned the code. Then I ask, okay, where is the learning from this? Where is the risks associated with that? What are the test cases you did? And there is no project-based learning, right? So training and learning, how do you make sure that you are constantly keeping them up to speed across the multiple dimensions? And we talked about the AI and ML solutions. We are beginning to see that already. An example is chatbot right now, the ChatGPT that we are all very familiar with. And outcome management, where we are constantly looking for how is this impacting programs, portfolios, and stuff like that. And when you shift it further, in 2025, I think all these things will start getting into a little bit more of a maturity curve, where we are saying like, okay, are they governed appropriately? Are there, service level agreements between these APIs? How scalable they are, how exposable they are, and how contained they are within their security dimensions. And also the automation and quality focus will emerge. And I want you to know that testing quality is a lot more than testing. As a result, automation is also taking its new meaning at this point. And in 2026, we will try to see some of these things that are emerging, take a little bit more concrete shape, scaling agile projects, how different types of frameworks will adjust themselves based upon lessons that they have learned, and make sure that they are getting mature. Right? And then we are moving into 2027, where more IT spending will continuously follow, and more regulations will be coming up in terms of ensuring environmental awareness and the metaverse consolidation. And I'm seeing some of this may shift left. As an example, I gave you that ChatGPT. It's already happening in 2023, and I'm sure many other things may emerge as a result of that. So you will see these trends constantly be in parallel. It's not going to be serialized, and they will continuously mature iteratively and incrementally. Okay. So each trend is therefore loaded with many types of risks requiring leadership at various levels. So this is where I would like to get into the next stage of how do we tackle the future ahead of us. And I have come up with 4 zones of challenges that the leadership should take into consideration. So, which is going to be leading people, how to identify, attract, nurture, train, and retain talent. That's a biggest task of us. The next one is going to be scaling the processes. When I mean scaling, it is focused on what to keep, what not to keep, how to modify, and how to sustain, and stuff like that. So you're looking at all the different processes. They are not specific to IT implementation. It could be management, hiring, many other processes that are coming into play over here. Okay. And we are also looking at the technology. The technology is no longer just a value add to the business, and technology itself is creating business at this point. And so how to promote technology so that its adverse effects is also kept in check. Right? One of the reasons why the ChatGPT was put on hold for 6 months of development or anything like that is primarily because of its potential abuse, the adverse effects that it can create, that we wanted to make sure that we understand, although it is a model. Governing organization, how to ensure that the companies come together within an industry how the industries come together to make sure that they are using the people and technology appropriately. So there's going to be a lot more governance regulations that will emerge as well on these 4 different zones. So this is what I am looking at, and I'm going to take it to the next level in terms of breaking them down. Okay, so when you look at the people side of the equation, I mentioned a new emerging talents, training and development, and talent management strategy, right? So what do these things mean? So trend 1 is attracting and retaining talent. So in the next 2 years, we will see an increasing demand for multidisciplinary talent, using both business and technology for problem solving and decision making. That means we are looking at power skills for both business and technology people. So business members have to understand technology, technology members have to understand business. And it's no longer like designer and a project manager or a product owner. The expectation is that we need to actually bridge the gap. And so there is already an emergence of new roles like biz technologist, biz linguist. And these things are already emerging, where cross-domain knowledge is coming into the place. And in one of the conferences that I attended last year, I heard this term called versatilists. That means you are able to work in multiple roles, not just one role. And please bear in mind, we used to talk about, we still actually talk about, T-shaped skills, where we tell that needs to be breadth of domain knowledge as well as depth of one particular domain knowledge, but we have moved forward from the T-shaped skills, and we are also looking for pie-shaped and E-shaped skills, which means more than one depth of domain knowledge. People are already looking into those things already. So that's one of the trend that is coming through. And the second trend is for continuous learning. Now, how do you make sure that these members are properly trained? There is a limited attention span. They really would like to make sure they are kinesthetic learner, and they want to see almost like quick gratification of the things that they have learned and stuff like that. So when you are looking into all these additional patterns, micro learning, gamification, simulation, role rotations, these things are all emerging. And yes, we used to call some of these things as job shadowing and stuff like that. But there is a lot more about like know one particular thing alone and apply them, and you get recognition for that. So things of that nature is constantly emerging, right? And great resignation is driving many people to self-directed learning and earning. And you are seeing this already, like the freelancers. People that are able to come and spend a couple of hours and design a website or design a logo or something like that, right? These things are emerging. And if you look at some of the online learning environment as well as the corporate environments, companies are creating their own universities, academies, much beyond what a normal massively open online college like Udemy, in Coursera, I'm just giving you a couple of examples, they can offer. There is a lot more to this than how to take these principles and apply in today's work environment, productivity and stuff like that. So we always want to make sure that when you are looking at people, we lead them with empathy. Very nicely said, but then what exactly does that mean? When you take that and break it down, I'm seeing 2 important risks that needs to be paid attention to, right? One is going to be the structural risk, which is clarifying roles and responsibilities. Please bear in mind, I didn't say job description. I said more about roles and responsibilities, which means we need to associate responsibilities with the role, and people can take on any role. In one project, there may be a project manager. In another project, there may be a business analyst. In another project, there may be an architect or a designer, right? So we need to be able to provide that kind of a structure. Similarly, identifying capabilities, skills, and competencies. Now, capabilities is more about the willingness to learn. Skills is more about applying that and learning. going to college, going to certification classes, or spending some time learning about a product process or something like that within your organization or outside, and things like that, volunteering and stuff like that. The next one is more about competencies, applying the skills learned. Skills are learned, competencies are earned. Competencies is what is associated with experience. And we are also looking at central dependency. In other words, this dependency is what normally people call it as key person risk, where we want to avoid that dependency on a single person. If that person goes away, wins the lottery, you are looking at potentially many things slipping, right, in your project or product development. And the next one is more about the behavioral risk. Even if you have the structure in place, you want to constantly keep the car, oil changed and tweaked and stuff like that. So consider different ways of working. What are the different wow principles that we can apply? Ensure physical and psychological safety. Make sure that they feel that the culture is not toxic and things are working. And observe and avoid disruptive behaviors, like monopolizing a conversation, for instance. So these are things that you want to observe, because when somebody does this, conflicts are brewing, and today's people will actually withdraw too quickly because they're looking for instant gratification, and they get the opposite of it. They may or they may not necessarily fight, because they choose to fight the battles, correct? And then exploring career enabling advancement. So whenever somebody is there within your company, they are always going to be representing a flight risk in a good way too. Their life moves on for them, and as a result they have to get promoted, they have to move on to the next role, next bigger role. And when they do that, they are creating a vacuum. And as managers and leaders, we constantly have to look for that and say, if this person leaves this, we are happy for them. But then how do I make sure that I create that opportunity for them to move into the next role, while I also constantly look for who will fill their existing roles? And evaluating the right use of the metrics. Measure what matters. We all say that, measure what matters, measure what can be counted, not necessarily countable. So these things, we talk about this. And so what are some of those important things? We mentioned critical success factors at the portfolio level, objectives and key results at the program level, and also the key performance indices at the project level. But how do we bring all these things together? That's something that we need to think about, because metrics ultimately talks about performance, and the performance is more about how productive a person is, how productive the teams are, and how profitable the product is. So we need to start thinking about these things when we lead people with empathy. Now let's take a look at the process. And I mentioned 3 things over there, automation and quality management, scaling agile project management, and also starting with the end in mind. Like, what will the customer see? What will the end user see? How am I generating value for them? That thought process should exist in us, in anything that we do, right? What's the benefit for them? What's the business case for this? And stuff like that. When you are taking a look at these things, a few trends come up, automation and quality focus. So by 2025, the craze for acceleration of this automation will kind of stabilize, and there will be a new emerging love for manual testing. Now, what I mean by that, there are certain things that cannot necessarily be constantly tested through the automation means. And because of the sophistication of automation, we will find out new things that needs to be tested, which are not prime candidates for automation. So we will get into that mode, which means testing becomes commoditized. It's expected of all of us, not just a tester. Quality engineering, quality assurance, quality control, all these things will emerge. They already emerged, but it will become more prominent. Automation alone will not seen as a cost differentiator, because quality is a lot more than testing that automation tries to support. Building quality focus in the process as well as the product will emerge, because process is the vehicle through which the product is delivered. And in some companies, process itself may be the product. Say for instance, you are implementing Six Sigma in an organization, or you want to introduce Agile, you want to introduce principles of risk management and stuff like that. Now that is the process, and that process becomes the product within your company, within your teams and stuff like that. So trend for scaling Agile project management, and in the next few years we will continually see more about higher order project management thinking. So this means, who are my stakeholders? What are the quality considerations? Who provides the risks? And how do I communicate with all these members? And these are not just your project delivery team. This is much more than your project being part of multiple projects within your company or programs or portfolios and stuff like that. And so the increased organizational agility and program benefit management will take prominence. So focus on value stream for benefits management. We are seeing this trend already pick up, value stream journey, value stream management. We are talking about all these things already. And second thing is more about intense focus on the growth of risk management beyond software product management. In every field, we are going to constantly see more and more. So we have seen the GAMP, the General Automation Manufacturing Protocol. We are seeing failure mode effect analysis. We are seeing ISO 31000 coming for risk management. Many such things are emerging constantly, right? In the next space is going to be increased adoption of the agility beyond the team levels. It's no longer just my team that needs to be agile. It's going to be all the teams that needs to be agile. The organization needs to be agile, and also the suppliers and contractors that we work with needs to be agile. So the agility is becoming more penetrating into number of different things. But we need to make sure that we are practicing the right agile, not the scrum butt or fragile or anti-agile and stuff like that. We still see a lot of anti-agile patterns over here, which I will not get into right now, but those are the things that we need to keep in mind. So how do we do this? Continuously focus on principles. Again, that's easier said than done, but what does that mean? Risks that arise due to cost of quality. Now, I won't get into the details behind the cost of quality, but in cost of quality, there are two dimensions, which is cost of conformance and cost of non-conformance, or cost of good quality and cost of bad quality. In the cost of good quality, you talk about how to build quality and how to assess quality. In the cost of bad quality, you talk about the internal failures and the external failures. Now, all these thought processes bringing quality by design. The thought process of quality by design. Thinking into our head. Now the next step is considering about, okay, we will have automated, but the automation itself needs to be maintained. When does that automated script no longer relevant, or when do we have to refine this and things like that. So we need to start looking into those places and evaluating application lifecycle management tools over work authorization tool. We are no longer interested in one part of the story. We are looking for the full story, which means I don't want somebody to come and say my task is completed, but I want to be able to say my task with these requirements are completed, my tasks associated with the release are completed, and my test cases are connected with the requirements that are verified and validated. So I'm looking for the entire picture and not necessarily one part of the picture. The next one is going to be risks due to lack of project discipline. When you look at project discipline, there are multiple things that we are looking at. How do you start the project correctly? How do you set the business environment or understand the business environment? How do you execute this? And how do you monitor different things that are happening in the project during the time of execution and closing the phase of the project or the end of the project? And many knowledge areas come into play over here in terms of integration, which is change management, scope, schedule, cost, quality, stakeholders, resources, procurement, communication, risks. Many things come into play, and all these things are not going to be forgotten. We need to still apply each and every one of those principles, but bring those discipline more rigorously. To do what? To think from the end consumer's perspective, so that you are looking at systems thinking. What are we doing? Why are we doing? What are we accomplishing by doing these things? What are we giving up in order to accomplish this thing? How do we know that we have accomplished these things? So that kind of thinking is what is called systems thinking. And inculcating some value management discipline. When you do these things, you are looking at what are some of the customer value, what are some of the business value that we have to accomplish, what are some of the process value that we have to accomplish, the technical value that we have to accomplish. So you need to look at multiple different things to ensure that the value is constantly managed. And when you are doing these things, you are not just thinking of the product that you are delivering, which is nothing more than an output, but you are looking at the outcome. How will this be working with the IT help desk, with the customer help desk, and subsequently to the customer, to the end consumer, and stuff, stuff like that. And that's operational excellence. And then bringing that back into this. And these kinds of systems thinking and operational excellence integrated with value management is what lean, agile, good project management disciplines, product management disciplines, DevOps framework, all these things are bringing these things, repeatedly into the picture. Let's take a look at technology. When you take a look at technology, there is technological convergence that's happening, which I mentioned before about how many different types of technology are coming together because of the fourth industrial revolution space. And because of the interoperability, the modularity and stuff like that, we are also looking at the API governance and how do you make sure that these interoperable things, the product that are created because of all these things working together, is sustainable. And the predictive and AI recommended solutions. So some of the things that we have to keep in mind in terms of how we allow the AI and ML model to give solutions to the customer and make sure that the right solutions are given to the right customers. So trend 5 that I'm predicting is the IT spending growth. So the next few years, as I already mentioned, is going to be constantly seeing an increased spending, 30% or more, where we will spend money on technological assets, infrastructure, and many other things. And as a result of that, the pot of gold is going to be always limited in terms of money available or budget available. As a result, what will happen? So some other areas will, shrink, and because of recession and inflation and things like that are constantly, up in people's mind right now, there is also going to be how much I will save now to protect for myself for the future. So that kind of thinking is already there. And also security vulnerabilities and related impacts. We have seen a lot of case studies where we are seeing one thing was dropped. As a result of that, there was a huge impact. And we have seen a lot of such examples already. And so we are taking a look at, okay, how do we make sure that we are doing proper risk-driven development? Thought processes are emerging that way, and increasing focus of regulations around developing technologies. I'm sure there's going to be a lot more regulation that will come with artificial intelligence and machine learning as well. But these are emerging at this point, and we have seen already many things like GDPR that came and said how data will be governed within an organization, the CAN-SPAM Act. And in the marketing world, so many things are already there. Okay, now API governance and sustainability, this is already picking up. By 2024, we will see some increased need for tool consolidation in the application lifecycle spaces, and we are seeing that the big fish eating the small fish kind of thinking already happening, where people are consolidating in the tool spaces as well. But at the same time, there is also increased focus on, is this the right tool? Is this the right tool to tell me the whole story? And what kind of support does it provide in order for me to use this tool if I don't need to move away from some other tool that I also used within my organization? So there is going to be a merger of both horizontal and vertical tool consolidation and integration across the organization. And especially if this is going to be used within supplier network or vendors network, consultant networks, there's going to be a lot more activity going in this particular area, right? So continuous growth of APIs, their integration, and their use in embedded software software, that is at the firmware level also, that's coming. In example of that is the computer system assurance, CSA, which is emerging more than computer system validation. So those things are all coming up. Now, the second thing is going to be the unrealistic expectations of cloud compliance and cloud-only tools. There are, because of the GDPR that I mentioned, because of data privacy, data integrity, and data-related concerns. In fact, I should say, there are tools that are not being favored, and there are expectations that they need to be able to support both cloud and on-prem, so that it gives them more power. It's already happening. And elevated need for training as a result of all these things. Each and every one of those things are so much increasing in their prominence that we have to take some time out of our busy life to make sure that we are getting trained, so that we are, quote, employable. It's not always on the employer's list to provide us the training. Yes, they need to do that as well, but we also need to come halfway and meet that equation. Like, I am constantly getting myself continuously updated, and so I expect you to keep me continuously updated. That kind of a balancing act. This will be emerging as well, especially on the technology and management forum, when we also talk about people needs to be multidisciplinary and cross-functional and stuff like that. And predictive AI and ML solutions, there is a lot of data-driven insights that is happening. Example is the Kaggle, where you are having a lot of data, public data, that you can use to do some solution engineering at this point. But how do you take this information and apply to the next level in terms of making the right business decision, right vendor selection, right level of partnership engagement, and stuff like that? So these things are also emerging at this point. And when you look at artificial intelligence, growth of the risk-based testing and prioritization. Now, it's not that these things are new trends, but they are becoming more and more prominent. For instance, the product backlog is supposed to be risk-adjusted prioritized product backlog. That's how it's called. But when people say we are agile, we don't use risk, that shows the lack of understanding about agile in the first place to begin with. So growth of risk-based testing and risk-based prioritization is becoming more front-end to people's thinking. And extended market reach and talent expansion ecosystem. So we are no longer looking like market in one end is going to be favoring us all the time, because it's going to be not always the case. But at the same time, the people ecosystem is also going to be changing. So when the talents are getting really good and we don't keep them stimulated, challenged, and motivated, they will leave, right? And so what are some of the ways we are working with different types of people, organization, product organization, suppliers and vendors, the entire supply chain network, to make sure that we are keeping that system in balance. The next one is continuous growth of technology initiated business. There's going to be repeatedly many incubators that are coming up, where we are coming up with the different ways of doing things, different new innovative products. Many of the products that we are using right now are a result of those such innovations, and there is also a prediction that many technologies, many products that we will be using in the next 2-3 years are not even thought through, right? So there are things like that that are also constantly emerging. What I'm trying to tell over here is, at the same time, is high touch is much greater than high tech. While technology is constantly growing, the ability to manage these technology professionals is also going to be improving and increasing for us, right? So what does that mean? Execution risks, making sure that security and stability are constantly being thought through. And that's not like a add-on or a sidebar conversation. We are bringing that into the mainstream discussions. Similarly, incorporating sustainability and scalability, and I call these 4 S principles, security, stability, sustainability, and scalability. Now, making sure that our workforce is getting properly trained on the regulations and risk management, making sure that you understand what HIPAA means if you are working in healthcare, or Sarbanes-Oxley means if you are working in the financial space, things of that nature. So you need to get yourself oriented in many other areas as well, and that is emerging. So, and this is not going to be, I read a webinar, I attended a webinar, I learned everything about it. That's not the case. Similarly, with the innovation risks, when you are coming up with new ideas and stuff like that, you also have to start thinking in terms of, is this helpful for the customer? Will this actually start giving some bad information to the customer? And how do we make sure that we provide the customer the ability to make decisions and stuff like that? So these are all foundationally on the bioethics principles, like the beneficence, the non-maleficence, justice, autonomy, and explicability. These are all things that we have talked about. And on top of it, we have the project foundations, which is going to be fairness, responsibility, respect, and honesty, right? So how do we bring these things? Now, when you put all these, high-tech and high-touch stuff together, we are looking at risk-driven development. What can potentially go wrong, and that becomes the requirement, and we actually design everything to make sure that we eliminate that. We are addressing those risks and stuff like that. So all the risk response strategies that we have talked about, like the avoid, transfer, mitigate, share, exploit, enhance, all these things are coming into picture, right? Incorporating therefore a process discipline. How are we factoring risk dialogue in our discussions? Those things are emerging repeatedly. Now, when you look at the organization side of the things, we talked about outcome based product management. We are talking about environmentally aware firms, and also the metaverse consolidations, right? So the trend number 8 is outcome-based product management. Here we are focusing more about the consolidated single source of truth across all the tools. Doesn't matter how many tools I use, I want to make sure that I'm having the single source of truth coming across all of them. So how my requirements are associated with the releases, and how my requirements are tested with definition of done along tasks, acceptance criteria with test cases, how many of them were tested, what kind of defects were identified with what kind of requirements, so that you are looking into unscripted and scripted testing, and many other elements of risk-based testing. Increasing the need to consolidate and reduce the total cost of ownership. The more the number of tools, the more the number of processes and cost that is required to manage these things. So how do I consolidate these things? That's also emerging. Increasing demand for enterprise level agility while managing the enterprise level risks. If a supplier changes, all the programs and projects that are going to be using that supplier is going to be impacted. When there is going to be vendor compliance loss or employee compliance loss, that's going to be impacting all of us. So many things are into the equation here in terms of how we work together. Environmentally aware firms. More and more the organizations are evaluating their footprint. Should I have to have additional data center, which means it increases the carbon footprint, or the heat it generates is actually not necessarily contributing nicely to the environment. So that thought process is continuously being evaluated by artificial intelligence and all the fourth industrial revolution spaces that we talked about. So this is going to be helpful in some shape or form for some of those undeveloped and underdeveloped countries. United Nations came and identified like 17 important goals for sustainability, and some of these things can be augmented very nicely and addressed very fairly and squarely by this fourth industrial revolution technology. So technology is definitely here to stay, and we need to put some some management discipline to make sure that we are addressing these things as well. So alarming awareness of the global climate and going green, right? I don't need to say anything more than that. New frontiers in value exchange. We are constantly looking at how do we make sure that we are adding value to not only the end consumer, but also reducing the footprint of challenges to the environment, to other things. And we are also looking at the awareness of sustainable development goals, which I just mentioned. What are some of those sustainable development goals and how do we tap into them? And organizations even try to come and associate themselves saying like, okay, I am connected with United Nations goal number 4 or goal number 3 and stuff like that. So there is more growth in those space as well. Now, trend number 10, which is my last trend, which is more about the creative metaverse consolidation. And this is a lot more difficult and a little bit more abstract, where you are able to create another clone of your decision-making capacity, and you are available for other decision-making and problem-solving while you are still connected with your primary responsibilities and stuff like that. So I'm not sure how this is going to manifest completely, but nevertheless, you look at this metaverse is taking a look at how do I make sure that there is proper gaming and entertainment for digital health. So people have started developing a persona of themselves where they are applying certain learning in a different environment, and bring that learning and say, if that can be learned, how can I learn it over here? I know it's kind of abstract, but the metaverse is a little bit still in an abstract form. And similarly, virtual workspaces for conferences and idea incubators. And we have started seeing these things a little bit here and there, because the conferences, especially during the time of COVID, you would be able to walk around to virtually to another place and engage with somebody over there. And as soon as 2 avatars come closer to each other, something immediately pops up and say, all right, here is your video, let's talk to Sriram now. So those kind of things evaluated. Similarly, idea incubators, the law of 2 feet, how it can be applied and stuff like that is being experimented in the metaverse as well. And the digital rights movement, making sure that your protection of intellectual property and any potential revenue channels as a result of that, all those things are actually emerging at this point as well, in terms of how they will be done, where they will be done, what kind of challenges and risks may emerge. We are yet to see. Okay, now that's the reason why I want to come back and say leadership starts with you, because there are so many different things that we have talked about, and we can't always come and say it's a person with the title of a leader, the person with the title that has the responsibility of the leader, because everything is starting with you. Leadership starts therefore with you. What does that exactly mean? Risks due to lack of leadership within us. We are yielding to old tools and old ways of doing things, primarily because of our comfort zone. We are not necessarily looking out for the value gaps, rather than telling, okay, you asked me to do this, so I did this. If this is not the right thing for the customer, well, I didn't do the product analysis. Right? So thinking about it from the systems perspective, the full value chain, value journey. Regulations, therefore, are not just words. They do have an impact on how your product will be perceived, how it will be judged, and potentially even assessed in terms of fines and other things as well. Similarly, risks due to leadership with the people in the leadership roles. Doing it right, and this is more about making sure that they are following the management principles of doing it right, which is more about efficacy. Are you doing it right? The things that you said you are supposed to be doing. The next one is going to be, if that's not there, you can expect more of this. If you are doing the wrong things, you cannot expect more of the wrong things, right? Instead, we are looking for now doing more, better, cheaper, and faster. And I would like to, even add this one word, happier. Doing more, better, cheaper, faster, and happier. That's what is expected of many people, and that is what is called efficiency. So without efficacy, there is no efficiency. Now, when you move to the next level, which is going to be more about effectiveness, doing it so well to create and lead with that strength, to create more opportunities and lead with your strength to maximize the opportunities and minimize the threats. So with that, I bring to the end, which is the 4 important elements that I talked about: leading people, scaling processes, controlling technology, and governing organizations. There are a lot of opportunities. Thank you very much. It was very nice sharing my findings with you. Please connect with me on LinkedIn and tell me how you like this. Thank you very much.
Thanks for joining us for this virtual bonus session. We hope you enjoyed it. Learn more about InflectraCon, our live, in-person conference from April 19th through the 21st, 2023 in Washington, D.C. by visiting InflectraCon.com. Stay tuned for more great content, news, and events from Inflectra. Learn more at inflectra.com/company.